so that we can later share it on YouTube as well, and on LinkedIn and all these other beautiful platforms. So welcome everyone. Welcome you all who are over 50 and everyone who is interested to know more about this Wize generation. This special online conversation is hosted by Move Into the Future and the Wize Move Society, the online community for the over 50s. So this generation is growing by the day. We're living longer, are longer healthy and active, and are better educated than ever. We just need to tap in our knowledge, experience, and wisdom. So with these Tuesday live conversations, we aim to give you a glimpse of what is happening online on the Wize Move Society, to share a bit about both the challenges and the opportunities that the 50+ generation is facing, as well as how the members of the Wize Move Society work together to create the solutions and play an active role in society and in the economy. So we're very clear that we're not on our way out, but that we're part of the future. So for those who join us on Zoom, we love you to contribute to the conversation. If you have joined us on Facebook, please share your thoughts and questions in the comments. So my name is Ingun, founder of Move Into the Future and the creator of the Wize Move Society. And I'm here today with my co-host, Dr. Tatiana, Rowson, and our guest, Holly Lynch from Bermuda. Holly is a consultant, a transitional life coach, a board member, and has a long history in the marketing and advertising industry with specific focus on social justice and women's leadership. Holly is also an influencer, so a teacher and coach on the Wize Move Society. And today we're going to dive into the topic, communicating your personal brand at any age. So before we do that, I would like to give the floor to my co-host Tatiana, so she can share a bit about her background, and she will pass on the stage to Holly. So
Thank
Tatiana,
you, Ingun.
is there any marketing background in your branding? Is there any experience?
Oh, I'm going to make a small confession. I have a master's in marketing because once upon a time I was very, very curious about it.
Good.
And but that's just my studies. I never don't progress anything with that. I'm a psychologist. I'm an academic. I work in academia. Really interested in behavior and how people develop their careers. And one of my areas of research is pretty much this area of midlife and the transitions and changes we experience and how they impact later life. So I know we were chatting offline and we were chatting a lot about, talking about a lot of interesting things. Well, not me, Holly was saying a lot of interesting things. So I don't want in this intro to start tapping into that because I'll let Holly start. But I do have a lot of questions, observations and thoughts to share. So I won't hold anyone anymore. Without further ado, I will welcome Holly. Holly, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Tatiana. And actually, I'm a social anthropologist by background, so we share some similar interests. And I'm from New York originally. I just moved to Bermuda because it's a little bit safer and sunnier here than it is in New York these days. But my career has been in branding and communication strategy, but that isn't how I define my personal brand. Over the time of working with brands, especially those that have been focused on social justice, social impact, I've had the real gift to explore the heart behind what we see in advertising, what we see in, a magazine or on a TV screen or whatever. And it's really exploring that essential element that makes a brand unique in the world, that provides it with human value rather than financial value. So we often think about brands and you're like, oh, that's an expensive brand, or that's an inexpensive brand. And it distracts from what is core about branding and what is honestly core about human beings. Because from the moment we are born, we develop a brand, and we don't normally think about it that way. We think about, oh, well, I went to grammar school here and I went to high school there and I learned these things and I learned those things, and I'm a sister, a mother, a brother, a grandfather, whatever. We add labels to our lives that that often distract from who we are as people. And we use them on our resume writing, we use it in our daily conversations as sort of a distraction from who we are and how we show up in the world and what the value is that we provide. And in the course of personal branding work, what I love to do with people is really get into digging into their history. And this is whether it's a brand in the world or it's a personal brand, because often people forget who that essential child was, or that essential student was, or that essential passionate, rebellious, tenacious advocate for justice. And it's really going back there to the essence of who somebody is and helping them explore it as they move into a later phase in life. So I had the great gift while working on the Dove campaign for Real Beauty to focus for the second element of the campaign on women over the age of 50. And it was a true gift to meet these women, whether they were from Brazil or they were from Germany or they were from the Netherlands, because they had a very unique perspective on who they were. And they saw this as the best part of their lives, but they didn't know how to express it. And so working with them on being themselves and expressing their humanity and their beauty, because beauty has no age limit, and that was the core essence behind our message, was that every woman, regardless of her age, is beautiful at her core. And how does she show up in the world? How does she express that beauty? And it was a real pleasure to work with women who had moved beyond the trappings of career and moved beyond the trappings of necessarily raising children, and saw this as the best moment in their lives and wanted to reach out to the future and see, who am I going to be tomorrow? Yes, this is who I was yesterday, but where do I stand now? Where do I get to go? And what is the way I want to show up? And I found working with them to be incredibly fulfilling, because they showed me a part of myself that I hadn't considered yet. And so that was a real gift for me when working with them, and really dug me into a place of personal branding at any age. Because most of the time we think about the younger generations when we do advertising, branding development, et cetera. We talk about, oh, who's the next generation? And what are the tweens and the teens and the Gen Yers and the Gen Zers, these the future generations, when in fact we forget that at any age you can get back into that core, express who you are in the world, and really take that into the next phase of your life. So that's how I approach personal branding, and that's how I approach branding in general, because we all have a gift and we all have a purpose, but it's about identifying that purpose as we move through life.
Beautiful, Holly. Yes, clear what you're thinking. And while preparing this conversation, we were looking for a title, and I was like, how about 50 plus and personal branding or something like that? And you were like, why? It is about personal branding at whatever age that you are in. And it isn't about only the 50 plus. I do believe that it does change who you are and how you want to be seen by the world. But the personal branding in itself, and that is also what you mentioned just before we started, is very much about who you are, your purpose, and how you want to show up.
Yes, I mean, through the core personal branding process that I teach, we start at, what do you do? So tell me about your career. Tell me about all these things that you want to celebrate that you did in your life. You had 5 kids, you had 2 husbands, you lived all over the world. That is how you express out there, but it isn't necessarily who you are in your core. And yes, the core evolves, but evolves in a way where there is an essential truth that remains the same. It's just how you express that truth that changes. So you might change your clothing, you might change your geography, you might change your career path, but it's about digging into what is that gift that you bring as a unique human being that remains true regardless of how you show up in the world. And that provides you with value and positioning, because that's what we do with brands, is we talk about what is your position in the world. How do you position next to other people who do the same skill set? And it's what distinguishes you from a core rather than from what you've done that allows you to pivot, change, evolve, grow, develop some wings that you didn't necessarily think that you had.
Yes, thank you. Very interesting. And Tatiana, I know, well, you just shared with us that you have a master's in marketing, so you know more about it than I do probably. So how do you want to show up before you ask your first comment, you ask your first question?
Well, I want to show up as human and humane. And I think that's something that's really important for me. And it goes everywhere I go, and whatever I do is something that's really important in my work and personal relationships. And I really like, Holly, you bringing these ideas, because usually what I find is personal branding, the first reaction is people relating to a persona, to a mask, or to some polished, sanitized version of themselves that is just there to sell. And bringing it back to the essence, it's what makes it really true and what makes it really different. And as you were talking, I was here reflecting, what is my essence? What is this thing? I know I responded very quickly, but I was thinking on my feet as you're talking, because that's a very deep question. And I think is a question that I usually return in my own life. So I'm sharing here because I work in this field, I do personal development with people, and it's still, I find it's a challenging question not to be trapped on what other people see in me,
Right.
what other people say it's nice about me, and be true to what I see, that what I'm all about. So
Yes. And as a psychologist, I'm sure you're used to dealing with other people and helping them identify who they are, but it's often hard to reflect on oneself and say, okay, so this is what I'm seeing in other people around me, and this is how I can help them identify what's going on with them, but what's going on with me? And it often takes others who play a fundamental role in our life. So in branding, we call them stakeholders. So maybe it's your kids, maybe it's your husband, maybe it's, your kindergarten teacher. You ask them, so what is it about me that's different? And you have to open up to that sense of vulnerability that they might not say something you want to hear, but it'll help you identify who you really are. And for me, at least, as I work with people and with brands, it really elucidates parts of people that they wouldn't necessarily see about themselves, or brands about themselves. So you might have customers who care deeply about certain elements that the brand doesn't think is important. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, but I thought that was just a given. No, that's essential to who you are. And so it's a great exploratory process where you get to really work with somebody and work with yourself in terms of, is this truly how I want to show up in the world? Is this what I choose to be? Because maybe that's not how I want to be seen by other people.
thank you. I think those again, those questions are very interesting. One of the things, I work at the university, I work with MBA students in their 40s, and they're coming through that stage, that those questions of who am I and what do I want to do and what's my legacy becomes really prominent at that stage.
Yeah.
And what I often find is that they really haven't stopped to think about that and ask themselves the question. They're talking about their competencies as this is my brand, rather than a deeper exploration. So, Holly, how is it like talking to people about that and getting them to bring that out?
Well, it's those moments when I really value my coaching expertise as well, because there are elements that coincide with branding and coaching where you have to think about, okay, so I'm dealing with some tender territories here, and I need to be careful about what I'm asking this person about themselves, because it requires an element of vulnerability. And I don't know how many of you have seen the Brené Brown TED Talk, but the bravest thing you can do is embrace your vulnerability. And it's those vulnerabilities that require you becoming a trusted partner, much like a psychologist, where you identify what is the behavioral pattern here, and how do we rethink those behavioral patterns so that people identify what they're doing and decide if this is who they want to be and this is what they want to do. Because often we do rely on labels to define us rather than looking internally and say, how do I want to show up? And, I've thought about it a lot recently with the division around the world, whether we're extreme left or extreme right or grandmother, grandfather, whatever, we have so many labels now that it's hard to get to that truth. And I've just decided I'm a human and I'm a friend, and those are the only ways I want to be seen in the world. But yeah.
Okay, thank you, Holly. And I think it's very clear, but going back to this 50+ generation, I do think that if you started working 30 years ago, there was still very much that mindset that you needed your career, that you needed to work for an organization, that you, I think it is at that time very much about, okay, so how do I want to others to perceive me as, that organizations need me, that they are going to, yes, create that mask of, okay, this is what I think I should look like to get that job. And then they have had that job for 30 years, they made some career, they've had that job for 30 years, they lose the job. They lose their identity. And then someone is going to ask them, so how do you want to be seen in the world?
Right.
Okay, this is the first time that someone asks them, so what do you want to be when you grow old? How do you want to be seen? How do you, this is new for them, I think.
Right. Well, the first thing I would say is old. That's a label you've automatically given yourself, and it's limiting. So let's really talk about, what does age mean for you? And let's talk about that career and the experiences and the value that it provided you, and how has it developed you as a human, rather than you relying on the titles that you had going through your life. So if you did have that mask, what did the mask enable you to express and develop internally that you now have the capacity to take the mask off? Because a lot of us, while we have to wear the mask, we develop internal strengths that the mask help us, control or whatever. So we don't necessarily speak out as a rebel. We don't necessarily, but we learn the way. It's like Sun Tzu and the art of war. So at some point you learn how to navigate all of these things. And when you have the capacity to take the mask off, it's about, okay, so the mask is off now. What have you learned through your life that you can apply to, show that you've learned that you are who you are and you have a unique gift right now? That would be my response to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If I remember this advertisement of Dove that you're referring to, they had to take off their mask, and not just their mask. They were there in their underwear.
Well, in the Pro-Age campaign, they were completely naked.
Oh,
and I'll have to send you the campaign. But yes, the whole idea was that women over the age of 50 are completely beautiful and completely naked. And they're so the photography was done by Annie Leibovitz, and we had a really beautiful TV script. And the irony, of course, in the United States is that we're so puritanical, is that we wouldn't air the TV ad. Germany would, lots of other places were willing to air the TV ad, but instead we leveraged Oprah, who was willing to talk about this because she was over the age of 50. And it wasn't until people realized that there are really significant influencers out there who have succeeded, not even just succeeded. Look at Martha Stewart, look at Oprah, look at all these people, Michael Bloomberg. I mean, they started really showing up in the world after the age of 50, when they started, flying airplanes and really expressing themselves on TV. So there is no limitation. And to call yourself old is automatically putting yourself in a box that isn't necessarily true. If you don't see yourself as old, why would you say that? So it's about putting those trappings aside and saying, all right, so you put on the mask and you did your duty, but you lost the job. All right, so you lost the job. That was a title. Is it really stopping you from moving forward in your life? What did you learn on the job that you can apply someplace else? And I've had to do this, I can't even tell you how many times in my life, But, cancer in and of itself redefined me in terms of what my capacity to do was, but it didn't redefine me as a person. So it was sort of identifying what is that element of me. That tenacity, as I was told earlier today, is how I show up in the world. I'm tenacious. So regardless of the fact that I can't use my right foot anymore, regardless of the fact that I have 2 massive scars on my body, I can still show up in the world and I can be who I am and position myself uniquely in a way that I provide value to others.
Absolutely. And you're doing a great job.
Thank
you. Mary Jane, how about you? How do you want to be seen? How do you want to show up?
Yeah, interesting question to put it into words. I think taking a page out of Tatiana's book, the compassionate, humane side of me is very important to be seen and to be acknowledged as well. But I also, and Holly, something you've said resonates with me. Even though I know, I look in the mirror and I see the wrinkles and, things that have changed, etc. But I don't feel old inside. And I think this is really where, I mean, if I want to be defined, I want it to be as energetic as leergierig. Ingun, help me with that. I want to learn, a growth mindset, open. Those are words that I want people to say, when you're talking to Mary Jane, you're not going to know that she's 67 going on 68, yeah, I feel like I'm 40, can't do all the things that I did when I was 40, probably. I don't challenge myself often, but I bet there'll be a few things I can't do. But yeah, that's how I want to be seen and experienced by others, because that's what I feel inside.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if I look at your LinkedIn profile, do I see these words? Do I recognize what you're saying right now?
Maybe not, but if you look at the values that I hold, because I do list the values and qualities that I feel that I bring in, and perseverance, tenacity is one of them, Holly, as well, humor, other things. But I think that the outstraling, what I exude in the photo, etc., is energy, is kindness, is so I think the combination of the description of what I am and what's important for me and what I do and my expertise is there in combination with the image and the fact you're not going to see that I'm 67. I'm not going to put that on my LinkedIn profile, but I think people will know this is a mature person who exudes energy and has a kind face. Do you know what I mean? So those are the things that I think will come across in terms of the branding. But Holly, I'll leave that over to you. Have a look at my profile.
I would love to, absolutely. And I was just going to say, my father just turned 85 and he just got his first iPhone and he's texting me all the time. He's FaceTiming me sometimes by accident, but like he's forever young and that's who he is. And, he's Irish, full of humor, wants to talk 24/7. Sometimes I run out of steam because he wants to talk so much. But absolutely, if you're a kid inside, that doesn't have to die with age. Keep the child alive. It keeps us all young.
Mm-hmm. Yes, fantastic. I'm going to Mary Jane. Thank you for your openness. Deborah, you have no limits to what other people think of you. Do you?
Well, talk about reinventing yourself. And you ask about, what's my essence? And I'm going through a metamorphosis right now, combining the opposites, which is somebody who is into the elements of yoga and meditation and breathing and self and personal spiritual development, and bringing out a side of me that's always been there. And it's a side of humor. So how do I brand myself? And if you go to my LinkedIn or my Facebook pages, you'll see that I've just started to come out of a box. And I'm actually getting good feedback with that, of developing characters. And what I want to share is, because I've kept myself in a box for so many years, that finally at the age of, and I will be 74 on 24th, that it doesn't matter how old you are, the essence comes out when, especially for me, it has been, I'm now mature enough to handle all of this. And I have to say that it is so joyful, blissful. I'm being encouraged, and I'm taking a risk. I'm taking a risk because people could just say, you are stupid, but I'm making people laugh. And there are truths in what I want to impart. So I'm just learning how to massage what do I want to say, and how can I say it in my spontaneity in a way that would inspire somebody to laugh and yet say there's actually a truth in there in 2 minutes or 30 seconds. So that's a task. So I've been writing madly what you said here. And I get chills because this is so true. Yeah, it's a very exciting time for me.
That's fantastic. So I have a question for you. So is the box you've lived in yoga instructor? What is the box that you see yourself? Having
Okay. Good question. My box was, I had to be perfect.
Okay.
And therefore, if I made a mistake, people wouldn't like me, they wouldn't love me. So it was kind of that thing. And so one of my characters is going to be Polly Perfect. And there's Edgar Ego, who's kept me in a box as well. And so the two of them are a team. And but they've grown because I've used yoga as my growth tool. Okay. And so they're kind of changing, but they're kind of holding on to who they are, and yet they're changing just through osmosis. So stay tuned.
Okay. Yes, I had a coaching client who had two characters as well. One was Susie Q, who was perfect, and the other was Rodeo Gal. So Rodeo Gal wasn't angry. Rodeo Gal was willing to jump off a cliff without worrying about the world, whereas Susie Q was like, oh, you shouldn't do that. So she had two very different characters. We're telling her completely different things to do. But often they could be partners. And I think if we were to work on your brand, I think we should start talking about, okay, so what are these two, what are they telling you about you? And what do you want to tell them? Because it is a dialogue between you, the essence, and the influences in your life, and saying, all right, well, you had your time. Thank you for your insights, but it's time to move on.
Yep, you got it. Let's talk, darling.
Absolutely, we absolutely will.
And that is also why I do believe that age matters. We change, and there's the thought about how anyone else thinks about us, that doesn't matter so much anymore. But we also change in our values and in who we are, and what we want to bring into the world, our purpose and our ikigai, or however we're going to call it. It does change, doesn't it? Yes.
I would say that your values probably respond to what's around you. My own personal values, I wouldn't say have changed. So the most important things for me are authenticity, honesty, openness, and trust. And I think that's really changed with time. What I've learned is, who I can and who I can't, and making sure that I'm not being taken advantage of by others, because I do, uphold those true values. But it's not often reciprocated. And you have to be ready for others to not necessarily be in the same page that you are. You don't have to change. It just means how do you navigate in a world where honesty isn't valued? I think we can honestly say to be frank right now, that honesty is not the most valuable thing in the world. We're told all sorts of clickbait, you have to believe this, you have to believe that, you're this, that, the other. So it's really a decision about how much you want your values to change, depending on where you are in life. But I don't actually think my value system has changed all that much. Have your values changed, Ingun, do you think?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
How have they changed for you over time?
I think I grew up in a situation with a very narcissistic father. And for me, and I think almost for the first 42 years of my life, it was about as long as I'm being seen, and whatever I need to do for it, as long as I'm being seen, things like that. And I really learned to be me, and I really had to think about, my values. So what are my values? I was always busy thinking about other people's values, and especially my father's, to make it mine. I thought I was the crazy one, the different one. That is also what was, of course, being told when I was young. That I just needed to make myself almost, well, not invisible, but I really tried to live by other standards than my own. And that is maybe my deeper values didn't change, but before I dared to communicate how I believed, and that is also from that moment on, there's no stopping me. It's me, and it's the authentic me, that what you see. What you see is what you get, that kind of thing. But yes, it maybe not the values that changed, but it absolutely changed the way I dealt with my values.
Yes, and I think at that point, it was probably you were addressing your actual value, because up until then, you valued others more than you valued yourself. And what were you putting forward into the world, and how was that special as opposed to what everybody else wanted from you? And honestly, my childhood was very similar. I was invisible, right? Make sure the cart keeps rolling, because that's your job, is to make sure the infrastructure functions. And then when you step outside the infrastructure, you're like, well, why is my value less important than that? And it often takes an abrupt moment in time for you to identify that. Was there something that happened to you that forced you to take that moment and realize?
To change, you mean?
Yeah.
Several burnouts. Okay. And that you really have to dive deep, because you're not being yourself. It is a constant theater, you're an actor on of doing the things that are expected of you. I'm an engineer, my whole high school, the university, that was almost all male. I worked in the IT industry, almost all male. So I was an expert on behaving as they thought. And that takes all your energy. And, that's just not good for you. So several burnouts, and realizing, okay, so what am I doing? What am I doing with my life? This is not good. I'm the victim at that moment, because it was really, taking my health. It was working on my health was getting worse and worse. Yeah. So there needs to be this wake-up call. I know that Tatiana was raised, I think you were already,
I already lost my thoughts in other thoughts. But I think that this conversation goes to show that this idea of personal branding is a much deeper and much more personal than we might think when we start approaching the question, because the question is a fundamental question, is a question of identity, is a question of being who you want to be in the world, and how then by communicating that, you can get to be in the right place, whether it's the right job or the right group of friends or the right cause, but you can be in the right place and therefore somewhere that you will thrive at any age, at any stage, and any aspect. And I think this is it takes me back to psychoanalytical conversations where you have to dig deep and to get to what is us and what is others. And sometimes these two things are mixed together, and that's fine. If they ring true to ourselves, then it's okay. But if they don't, how can we then let go of them in that process? And takes a lot of courage to do that, to let go, because there's a comfort zone of knowing that certain things are accepted and we are praised for it. And letting go of them is letting go of a bit of that and having to be brave. Like you said, Ingun, to be yourself, to be ourselves, to say the truth. It takes quite a lot of courage to do that.
Yes, one of the exercises I find most elucidating when I'm working with people is ask them to write their own obituary. And it's not as depressing as you might think, but it is defining what memory is left about you, and is it true to who you want to be remembered as? And it you know, it's very personal. But if you had to write your own obituary tomorrow, stop yourself in your life right now, how would you be remembered? And people often take a step back and like, oh, but I've got so many more years to live. And it's like, but you don't know that. You could get hit by a car tomorrow. I don't mean to be depressing here, but every moment, and I think COVID has really taught us this, is that if you haven't lived your life the way you want to live it, why? What's stopping you? What's stopping you from living the life that is best for you? So anyway, that's one of the exercises.
I love that exercise, Holly. It takes it again to a conversation I usually have, and whoever knows me in the classroom might know that conversation, that we use that story of the Hudson River, the plane landing in the river, and we say, okay, if you were in that plane at that moment and you land in the river, you're given a second chance. So what would you do then? How would you change your life? And there are a couple of stories and examples that emerge from that Rowson River story of people that actually took the steps they needed to take and they didn't for so many years because they thought they had forever ahead of them.
Right. And that's why I want to reflect back on what Ingun was saying, is often it takes a health crisis, something where something steps in the way and says, is this true? Is this right for you? And it isn't necessarily something we want to happen. I didn't want cancer to happen, but now that I've had it, it forced me to rethink, what am I doing in this world? And am I doing the best thing for me? Part of the personal branding exploration is maybe helping people stop and think. Because if there isn't going to be an external influence and you are curious, there's an opportunity to do it without it being a crisis, to actually think about your life. And I'd rather people not have to face a crisis in order to reevaluate themselves.
Yeah, I was just thinking, so how do I want to be seen? And I think it's there on my LinkedIn, but I really want to be seen as that change maker, created impact, and really not just on people's lives, but also on society and the economy. And there's all this passion and drive to do that. And I think that if I had communicated that when I was 10 years old, they would have just laughed and thought that I was crazy and things like that. Anyhow, it doesn't really matter. Stephanie, how about you?
Yes, how about me? Well, I'm just really into everything we were sharing. How would I want to be seen? No, yeah. the two words that came to mind was ageless and wisdom. And ageless because I have struggled with age all my life. When I was young, I looked older. You know, when I was like an early teen, I looked like a late teen. So that got me into all sorts of trouble. Then when I was in my 20s until, I don't know, the 40s, I looked younger than I was. So then I wouldn't be taken serious. Well, I felt, you know, again, perceptions, I felt I wouldn't be taken seriously as a coach, a consultant or whatever. So I wanted to look older. And it's only now or recently that I decided that I didn't care anymore about age, and I would look the way I look and have the gray hair that I have and still have the face that I have and be the age that I have and still do what I do. And but yeah, age was a funny thing. And wisdom, because I think that's what I want to bring, you know, bring light into the world where there is darkness, the deep love for humanity. So that's why I'm here, and I'm with the Female Wave of Change, and that, you know, that's what I want to bring. And yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
I'll keep it short because I know I can go into rabbit holes. So I'm making sure I'm not taking over.
I make an observation. It's really interesting, Holly, you touch of being vulnerable and be open to these conversations. Is interesting how we start talking about these things that are so important for us. We do feel a bit exposed and they are not easy conversations, even for the well-versed, because we all here, we actually quite into this world of having these conversations. So even for us, it's, or I can speak for myself, I'll speak in terms of I think these are things that makes you feel a bit vulnerable, and how important it is to embrace that as part of this process as well.
Yes, one of the things I found most valuable for people is to be vulnerable and to allow sort of that exploratory process, because until you unearth those vulnerabilities, you don't actually know what your true value is in the world. And it's, you know, the strongest thing you can do is to be vulnerable, because most people think, oh, you know, I'm going to put on my armor, I'm going to go into war, and I'm going to be the strongest person in the room. And the answer is no, the strongest person in the room is the one with no armor on, because they're just bringing themselves, they're showing up as them. And that's a very unsafe place to be for a lot of people. So yes, it's part of the psychological, you know this, because the more you work with the patient, the more they open up to you, the more they start identifying things that they didn't necessarily want to talk about a few months back or a few years back. So it's an evolution where people get more and more comfortable with those parts of themselves. And it's why, you know, personal branding isn't an immediate thing. You're not going to say, oh, this is who I am, this is what I do. It often requires some reflection and some time and some bringing in of some trusted friends who can help you identify those elements. But it is a very, very vulnerable and deep place to go if you're open to it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I love Brené Brown. It's one of my, I bring that also in, you know, a program that we're bringing at Female Wave of Change, Women Leading in Change. It is all about, you know, your vulnerability and really stepping into the arena, you know, without knowing the outcome, but being you. And that is so strong. Absolutely. I see that Diane is here, but she hasn't shown herself. So I don't know if I can ask her how she wants to be seen. So Diane, yeah.
Hello, everybody.
Go ahead. Yeah.
It's quiet right now. I'm on a dog walk, so that's why I'm just listen. So you can see me briefly.
Oh, hi there.
So it's been very interesting to hear everyone speak, and thank you, Holly, for sharing what you have. It was interesting. How would I like to be seen? Well, there's something that came up actually earlier today was about my mom, actually. And it was from a younger generation who knew my mom as a neighbor. And when she needed help and support through a very difficult time, my mum was there for her. So it's not me in a sense, but I want to follow in her as her role model, and for her kindness and just that openness with different generations, not seeing the difference, just being there as a friend. And I can recall that my mum felt an outsider when she came home with me as a baby into the area that she came into. And instead of following that through when this situation came about with Farwin, she embraced Farwin. And as I say, we had this conversation yesterday, just how wonderful it was to have that person in her life and share that. And the other thing I wanted to say was that I since I was 50, I had skin cancer on the top of my head, and I was very apprehensive and concerned about what the surgeon had to do and the impact. And one of the benefits of Zoom is you guys can't see it. And now, as I've grown in confidence because the years have gone by, I don't worry. But whereas before I used to worry on planes with people taller than I was, and as Tatiana knows, my son and all his friends are 6'3" and they're all rowers. So it's always been a bit of my self-consciousness, but I'm still me, and I've just grown to accept, you take me as I am. So you take me as I am today in my dog walking coat, and I'll be back to looking professional later. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. And that is also something, she mentioned it, and Stephanie mentioned it, that thing about age, about, getting older, and how are you coping with it? And right now I'm reading that book, The Super Age of Bradley Sherman. And actually our generation has really worked hard to have that vision of young is beautiful and age is out. We did that. We did that when we were younger. So to really also change that mindset, and for us being comfortable, I think we are, more comfortable in being older. So it's not so much us that minds being older, but it is still that perspective of now the younger generations that are still doing the things that we wanted them to do, is look at age, look at being older as of, out of date, useless. That's a little bit too much. But anyhow, it is that perspective, the products that we design, it's for the younger ones. It is the marketing that is focused on the younger ones. It is, so young is hip and cool, and being older is, so are we going to mention how old we are? Are we going to, that is something that is it is a challenge. It is a mindset change that we need to go through, our generation, but also the younger generations need to go through. And that is something, in a way, we are, well, we're not the class. I'm sorry. My phone is talking to me again. But anyhow, so it is strange about. I'm sorry. Anyhow, I'll close my phone.
The phone always makes a lot of sense of what we're saying. It's a great, can be a great conversation. So picking up on that, on age, I agree, Ingun. As a society, we have a lot to correct in terms of the wrong mindsets around age. I always say age is just a number. It's just a number because it's just so personal. And of course, there are different things that goes with that number we should watch out, but that's about it, really. Everything else, it's up to our interpretation of it. But that's not what we see communicated to us on a regular basis.
No, I think what is one of the great blessings of having iconic women like Helen Mirren and, you know, Jane Fonda is that these are, or goodness, I can't even, the Speaker of the House of the United States, and somehow she just went out of my head. But these are
Nancy Pelosi.
Yes, these are women in their 70s and 80s who are kicking ass. I'm sorry, but I want to be them when I grow up. Like, I don't, like Nancy Pelosi's my size. She's 85 years old. She still stands on 5-inch heels for 8 hours straight to fight a good fight. And I'm like, hats off to you. And I feel that way about a lot of our, especially women. I'm not sure men are doing as much as women are in terms of representing really positive influences for the future for young people. But yes, no, I'm in huge admiration of how those who have just embraced their age and continue to fight have done so.
Mm-hmm. And looking at, for instance, someone like Jane Fonda, she has been a rebel since she was young, and she still is, you know. Yep. So talking about authenticity, you know, this is the way to show up and to bring yourself. Yeah. Mary Jane, I see your.
Yeah, I just, one thought that's come into my mind, Holly, you know, about the Dove commercials and the stand that Dove took on showcasing older women and their beauty. But it's been, I think, one of the only, if not the only, company that has done so. And I remember in the article I wrote for Thrive Global, Ingun, I mentioned the fact about, I think it was in that article that I mentioned the fact that, you know, where are the other Doves, you know, where these organizations that want to profile, and many of you might know of the story behind my photograph on LinkedIn and how that all came about. But it was because this young photographer, she's in her 40s, she really wants to showcase the beauty of older women, older people, not just women, but men as well. And brings it out, you know, pulls it out of you. So I think people need to see this kind of, we need to be exposed to it, not just the 20s and 30s that are having a good time and look body beautifuls and beautiful faces, but the whole scope, the diversity of what we are as people. And so I don't know whether Dove has continued in that line, but as I said, it's the only one that I can think of that has done something like this.
You're absolutely correct. And I've had the disappointing experience of working with companies that continue, especially when it comes to boys, of, you know, women less so, but the youth appeal of sporting equipment and beer is always going after the next generation of young men. And why, I don't know, but it is a huge market opportunity. And that's one of the reasons why I'm excited to be a part of this conversation, because I think the Wize Move Society can voice a unique perspective in the world of the stakeholder capitalism space that we now live in. Whereas we buy your products, why aren't you talking to me? We are now having to deal with that when it comes to color. You know, so women of color are saying, hey, where am I in your ad? Why aren't you talking to me? And I think, you know, as we move through the next few years, hopefully COVID takes a sidestep and leaves us a bit alone. But as we move forward, it's those who have survived all of these experiences who have a story to tell. One of my favorite people in New York, her name is Mavis Swire. She is 102 years old. She has lived as a single mom, raising 2 children of color on her own. And her story and her beauty is like beyond. Like, she's such an icon for me that, you know, we often don't see them. They hide. And I think there's a huge opportunity now as we think about longevity, as we think about the skill sets we're putting to bed when they should be given new life, that's a market that companies should be really paying attention to, because you're not going anywhere. And I don't think you should consider it. You know, you have much of a life to live as I do. And I think companies need to start paying attention. I've been talking about this for probably 20 years now. And it's appalling to me that Dove is the only one who's really taken a stand on age.
Mm-hmm. Stephanie?
Yeah, I should have unmuted before. Isn't it like, because I see, you know, when I work with business school, or I used to, you still have these old marketing kind of techniques, and putting a persona and age being one of the demographic used, and then having all of the silver economy, but then really boxed into selling cruise for retired people, selling health, you know, selling really hard on things that we might, you know, not want to focus, and not on what Wize Move Society is about having still some work and activities and hobbies and being, I don't know, whatever we want to be in that age, and not being boxed in as the, you know, the old granny who's going to go on a cruise. I mean, that's what they are pushing.
Absolutely. And pharmaceutical companies, it's like, oh, you now have this medical problem, you have diabetes, but you could still live a life of, you know, full fun. And I'm like, that's not the right way to go about it, because you're focusing on what they don't want to focus on, which is the problem. Where is the opportunity? And I think there's a point of view difference, because you're being seen from above. Oh, this is who they are. This is what they need. This is what we think they want to look like, rather than engaging your audience in the conversation and saying, so how do you want to be seen? How would you like us to celebrate your life? Because it really is about celebrating, rather than saying, okay, so we have a solution for you. What if I don't want your solution? Right? It's providing a solution without asking the question first. And I think that's where a lot of communications has fallen short when it comes to an older generation. Is, you know, as I said before, my dad wants to be given an iPhone. Yeah, he might not know how to use it right away, but he wants to learn. He's not going to stop himself short by saying, oh no, that's too technically savvy for me. I don't want that, because that'll make me look dumb in front of younger people. My dad's like, hey, it's something to learn. I can live more now. So, you know, it's a change in perspective that we definitely need to have, because we're not producing as many kids as we used to either. So if we don't start rethinking how the markets work, then, you know, a lot of companies won't survive.
The spending power is here.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Okay. Thank you very much, Holly. And we only have 2 more minutes. So last words. Mary Jane? Anything?
Nothing. No, just Holly, how can we make it happen?
Well, we'll talk
Because
about that later.
Exactly. So that's the question I want to leave. How can we make it
Yes.
happen? The companies start taking this market, this age group seriously. Yeah.
Oh, it's a huge question. We need more than 2 minutes for that. Okay. Stephanie, last words?
Thank you.
Strong words. Thank you. Diane, anything that you want to, while walking the dog?
I am walking now. One of the things I just wanted to add was I did a business encounter last week with students in my school with Microsoft, and we're trying to create a multi-generational environment. But of course, because it's students, we aim at the younger generations. But we did say that we need input from all generations to enable products that Microsoft and other companies are providing, so that we can all be part of this solution. And one of the sad things, from the 20 students that were there, there was only one female.
Yeah.
So yes, we're talking about our over 50 generation, but you know, as far as the multi-generations, we just need that diversity so that we can all work together. So great to hear everything today.
Yeah, thank you. Really good point. Tatiana, anything that you want to say at the end of this session, this meeting?
I would say that this is just scratch the surface as a conversation. There are so many things that we could go really into depth. The questions about the personal branding and the essence and all these difficult and enjoyable explorations we must do today, not tomorrow, not in the future. And the conversations around as well, brands and the marketplace and organizations, which is, again, very, very important. And taking on, Holly, you mentioned social justice, a big matter of social justice as well, of creating a better, more inclusive environment at any age. So thank you, Holly. It was really insightful and really interesting. Thank you for joining us. Ingun?
Thank you, Holly.
Well, Holly, is there anything that you want to, your last words?
The only things I want to say are that you are all incredible, one, and two, I feel like I've made a connection with so many of you that, you know, if anybody wants to continue the conversation, I invite, you know, Ingun and the whole team to share my personal information. If you have more questions, if you want to delve deeper on a personal level, I'm an open book. I'm happy to share my life experience, my career experience with you as you start asking yourselves these important questions as you move into a more mature generation in your own lives, and start thinking about, what do I want to be? Who do I want to grow up to be when I grow up? So yes, I'm here anytime anybody wants to reach me.
Thank you very much, very much. Diane, I see that you posted something in the chat. I will respond to that after this meeting. Yes, thank you very much. It was really, I do believe, Tatiana, what you mentioned, I think we raised more questions than we got answered. So we do need to talk about this more. The good thing is that Holly is one of the teachers also at the Wize Move Society, where she will bring a program on personal branding. But I do think also on the other side, one of the things that the Wize Move Society is focused on is creating solutions for challenges that we are facing, starting new businesses. So thinking about products and about solutions and about anything that we can come up with is also very important. And that is also where we can use this knowledge about branding and about bringing really new products, new visions, new perspective, and looking at it from our age, what we call the wise generation. That would really be great. So, well, this is also, I'm going to finish thing, I'm sorry. This is a glimpse of what is happening in the Wize Move Society. So if you're not a member yet, you know, do join us. We will post oh, I'm sorry, there's phone calls coming in, and it's my mistake. We will join us on the Wize Move Society, because that is where we're really going to dive into these things. Really, we dive deeper and come up with solutions, because it is great, you know, if there are challenges, we can ask the younger ones to come with the solutions, but how about we think about what is the right way to do it? So really great conversation. Thank you, Holly, and really looking forward to your programs that you will be bringing. Thank the other ones. Next week, it will be Tatiana and Mary Jane as both hosting, and it will be Dorian joining us as a guest. We will give you more information about that later, and Diane will be joining us as a guest in 2 weeks' time. So that's also very exciting. Thank you all for joining us today, and have a wonderful day, wherever, evening, morning, wherever you are, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.